Happy Easter, everyone. You seem like a subdued crowd today for it being Easter. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Easter. All right. I love irony. I love the irony of Jesus' life. I love the fact that people that do not believe in Jesus, whether you would call them agnostics or atheists, I love the fact that every day of their lives, they're reminded that Jesus lived. Every time they look at the calendar, it's marked on the birth, it's based on the birth of Jesus Christ. I just love that fact that anytime they celebrate a birthday, they're reminded that that is based upon the year calendar that's based, once again, on Jesus being born into this world. But also think of the resurrection of Jesus Christ marking something very important. The resurrection validates or gives proof, gives evidence that what Jesus said is true. That Jesus, who he said he is, it validates that he was the Son of God. And it also proves that death can be defeated. You know, in our sermon series through the month of April called Risen, we are looking at the Easter week, the crucifixion, the resurrection, all of that, those elements, through the eyes of the different people who were there, who were actually there at that in that last week. Today I want to switch it up just a little bit. I want us to look at Easter through the eyes of the days of Easter, the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday. And what I'm going to look at is that Friday was a day of pain and suffering. Saturday was a day of confusion and misery. And Sunday was a day of celebration and victory. You know, and it's not only that we look at this through the eyes of those 3 days and see the Easter events, but I think if you look, you'll notice that that pretty much mirrors our life. That we have the days in our lives that are the Fridays, a lot of pain. And then the Saturdays in our lives are where we're confused. We don't know what to believe. And then we have the Sundays that we really can celebrate and have joy. So I want us to look at these because I know each and every one of us have been in those days or in those days right now. Let's first look at Friday, the day of pain. Jesus experienced pain at the ultimate level, but think about all of these different kinds of pain. He had the physical pain. He was beaten. He was whipped. He was wounded. He was spit on. He was slapped. He was scourged. He had a crown of thorns pushed down on his head. He was abused physically almost within an inch of his life. And then they nailed him to a cross. After they had done all of that to him, crucifixion was the most painful and dreaded method of execution that the Roman world had. It wasn't only physical pain, it was the emotional pain. It was a death of shame and embarrassment. It was to be hung on a cross, completely naked for the world to look. You were totally, totally helpless when you hung there. It was intended to humiliate. It was intended to be a symbol of total rejection by man and by God. But he also suffered another type of pain, spiritual pain. Now, we can identify a little bit with the physical pain because we've suffered that. We can identify a little bit with emotional pain because we felt that. But spiritual pain, we can't even imagine. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24 says, He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree so that we may die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. The only way that I can begin to try to understand what the spiritual pain was like is to think of the fact that in one climactic moment, all the sins and guilt and shame were put on his shoulders. That means every murder that had ever been committed or would be committed, every rape, every child abuse incident, every child molestation, every genocide, Every indecent act of humanity was placed on Jesus in that very moment. Do you wonder why Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? We have never experienced that kind of pain. Physical, emotional, spiritual. Now, I don't know about you. You can watch The Passion of the Christ every year. But when it came out, I went 2 times to see it. Took people 2 different times. And I can't sit down and watch it from beginning to end anymore. I just can't do it. I can see scenes and see pictures from it, but I just can't take it to see what Jesus went through. One thing we should know, Jesus understands pain. He understands your pain and mine. So what do we learn from Jesus on the Friday of his life here? Number 1 is that to lean on your friends. That's what Jesus did. Friends are extremely important in giving support and encouragement during the Fridays of our lives. Jesus reached out to his friends on the very night that he was arrested, his last night on this earth, this side of the cross. He spent it with his friends. He had the Passover meal with them. Then he had the Lord's Supper with them, instituted that. They spent that time together. And then he asked them to do something for him. Matthew 26:36 says, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. That's the ministry of reconciliation. The ministry of presence. It's just being there. I've seen that in your homes. That when you've lost somebody, your friends come. And they may just sit with you. I've seen it in the hospital waiting rooms. Where they come and they sit with you. Just to be there. To hopefully in some way lift some of the burden off of you. Learn this. Even the Son of God needed friends, and so do you. Do not withdraw on the Fridays of your life. Do not isolate yourself. Call on your friends and allow them to be a part of your life, a part of the pain that you're going through. Be open like Jesus was. He told his friends, he says, I'm overwhelmed. I'm about to die. What's going on in my life? The church is your place to find those kind of friends. And I am confident in saying that every one of you sitting here said, I've found that before. I found that when I'm going through the Fridays, this is where my friends step up. Second thing that we noticed that Jesus did on that Friday was he leaned on God. Friends can't always understand the depth of your pain, but God can. Friends get tired, but God doesn't. The fact is that Jesus' friends fell asleep on him. Now, I'm not criticizing because they showed up. They were there. And I'm not going to criticize because I've fallen asleep a lot of times when I didn't need to. Raise your hand if you've ever fallen asleep on your job. Only 3 of you, okay. Okay. How many of you have ever fallen asleep in a classroom? Okay. How many of you ever fallen asleep during a sermon? Okay. Right. You put your hands up quicker on that one. I've fallen asleep mowing the grass with a push mower. We all know that. We've figuratively at times fallen asleep on our friends. And when we should have been there, we weren't. But God never does. He always shows up and always stays to the end. Look at Matthew 26:39. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. You see what Jesus does here? As he's attempting to lean on his Father, he acknowledges God was in control. But then he laid it out there. He says, I don't want this. It's okay to be honest with God and just say, I don't want this. Why do I have to do this? Why does life have to be this way? But in the end, you see that he submits himself to God's control because he says, not my will, but yours. That is the perfect way to lean on God during the Fridays of your life. But Friday ends and Saturday comes. And we call that Saturday the day of confusion. Jesus has gone through the trials and the torture. He has been crucified and buried in a tomb. And now it is Saturday. Stop and think, if you will, for a moment of what it must have felt like for those disciples. The 3.5 years to spend that time and to have all the hope and the promise. And then in one night, one day, everything is gone. You'd seen Jesus feed thousands of people. You'd seen him heal people of all kinds of terrible diseases. You'd seen them try to outsmart him and trick him into giving wrong answers, and no one could trick him. You'd even seen him raise people from the dead. But now, right at the time that you say that you need to really show your power, God, you do nothing. It's like you wanted to die. John 10:18 says, this is Jesus speaking, he says, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down. He's talking about his life, of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. But if you're one of the disciples and you're hearing that, and now you've seen Jesus crucified and put in the grave, that doesn't make sense. None of that makes sense at this point. They had the whole world in the palm of their hands, and it looks like Jesus just let it slip away. And they must have questioned themselves terribly. Imagine that. Wonder if they sit and thought, why did we let Judas leave out of our meeting? Why didn't we stop him? If we had stopped Judas, none of this would have happened. Why did we wimp out? Why did we not stand up for him? Why didn't we fight? Why didn't we stay close to him at the cross? And on top of all the embarrassment and shame and questions, they were afraid. Because they've killed Jesus, what's going to stop them from coming and getting the rest of us? They felt lost. They had given up everything and bet their whole lives on the future with Jesus, and now he's gone. Have you ever lived in a Saturday of confusion? Have you ever been in that part of your life? That the Friday is gone, the event is over, the pain, but now you just live in total confusion, questions, doubt. What's going to happen to me now? What am I supposed to do? My whole world has been rocked. Rick Warren, preacher and author of The Purpose-Driven Life, in 2013, his 27-year-old son, who had battled mental illness all of his life, took his life after Easter. Rick Warren stayed out of the pulpit for 6 months, did no interviews. This was a time of healing. But on the first weekend that he came back and he preached, the following week he did one interview on CNN. And the question was asked of Rick and his wife Kay, did you ever question God's existence through all of this? And Rick said this, he said, I never questioned his existence. I always knew he was there. But I did question his plan. I did question his timing. But I never questioned his love because I knew he loved me through all of this. The Saturday confusions. How do you get now from the Saturday to the Sunday? Well, remember God's promises. Please remember this line. Never doubt in the dark what God has shown you in the light. Never doubt in the dark what God has shown you in the light. Jesus tried to prepare his disciples for Saturday. John 16:22, he said, "Now is the time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy." Anyone can bring good out of good, but only God can bring good out of confusion and good out of things that are bad. He can bring purpose to your life again out of bad. The Bible is full of promises for days, the Saturdays in our lives. I haven't counted them, but I read it says there are 7,000 promises in the Bible. Certainly there's some there for you and what you're going through. You can trust him because of his promises, but you have to know the promises. Friday was a day of pain. Saturday, a day of confusion, but we come to Sunday, the day of joy. I think it's best just to read how Sunday changed everything. I'm going to ask you to do one or two things here. If you're not comfortable just sitting there and closing your eyes, then just put your head down so that you're not distracted by anything. And I want you just to imagine, as I'm reading this, imagine you being there. Bow your heads or close your eyes. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Just open your eyes now. How do you get from the Fridays and the Saturdays and disappointments of this life? How do you get to the Sundays, the days of joy? You rely on the power of God. Wishing doesn't get you there. Having regrets doesn't get you there. You don't have the do-overs. If I'd only done this, if I could just go back, we don't get those. You can't try harder. You can't make enough deals with God or anyone else to get there. It comes through the power of God. We'll rely on him and trust in him and see that it will come from God, and that just like it changed everything for these people, that when Jesus rose from the dead, we will recognize and we will be changed when we recognize that Sundays change everything for us as well. 1 Corinthians 15 says this, "Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ." This means that death doesn't win. This means that no matter how terrible your Friday is, and you may be in your Friday right now, it doesn't win. What this means is your Saturday and how confused and all the doubt, and maybe you've even walked away from God and you feel like you lost your faith because of the Saturday of your life. It doesn't win. It doesn't end on Saturday. It doesn't end in doubt and confusion, because Sunday is coming. Because God wasn't finished. Jesus wasn't finished with what he had planned. Sunday was coming. I cannot think of a better way to end what we're talking about right here than to watch this video that many of you have seen a number of times.
Friday. Jesus is praying. Peter's asleep. Judas is betraying. But Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Pilate's struggling. The council is conspiring. The crowd is vilifying. They don't even know that Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The disciples are running like sheep without a shepherd. Mary's crying. Peter is denying. But they don't know that Sundays are coming. It's Friday. The Romans beat my Jesus. They robe him in scarlet. They crown him with thorns. But they don't know that Sunday's coming. It's Friday. See Jesus walking to Calvary. His blood dripping. His body stumbling. And his spirit's burdened. But you see, it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The world's winning. People are sinning. And evil's grinning. It's Friday. The soldiers nailed my Savior's hands to the cross. They nailed my Savior's feet to the cross. And then they raised him up next to criminals. It's Friday. But let me tell you something. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The disciples are questioning what has happened to their king. And the Pharisees are celebrating that their scheming has been achieved. But they don't know it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. He's hanging on the cross, feeling forsaken by his Father, left alone and dying. Can nobody save him? Oh, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The earth trembles. The sky grows dark. My King yields his spirit. It's Friday. Hope is lost. Death has won. Sin has conquered. And Satan's just a laughing. It's Friday. Jesus is buried. A soldier stands guard, and a rock is rolled into place. But it's Friday. It is only Friday. Sunday is a coming.
I don't know if you're in the Friday of your life. It may have been a terrible year from last Easter to this one. Last 5 years may have been tough years for you. But don't give up, because Sunday came and Jesus rose from the dead and he fulfills the promises that he made. So don't give up, because your Sunday is coming as well.